At some point in the last year or two, your phone started feeling different. Not broken, not dramatically worse, just slower to respond, quicker to reach 15%, warmer in your hand during calls. Apps that used to open instantly now take a breath before loading. You plug it in at night, and by early afternoon, it's already asking for more. You've probably had the thought. Most people have it quietly, without fully forming it. Maybe it's time for a new one. And that thought, that vague, accumulating sense that the phone has run its course, is exactly what the smartphone industry depends on. Not because they engineered it cynically, though the incentives are worth examining, but because the symptoms of battery degradation and the symptoms of genuine device obsolescence feel, from the inside, almost identical. Almost. The average American replaces their smartphone every 2 to 3 years. That replacement cycle has shortened over the past decade, even as the hardware inside the devices has become genuinely more durable and longer lasting. The processors in mid-range phones released 3 years ago are still capable of handling virtually everything the average user does daily. The cameras are still good, the screen's still sharp. What changes reliably and on a predictable schedule is the battery. A lithium-ion smartphone battery is rated for somewhere between 300 and 500 full charge cycles before its capacity begins to fall meaningfully below its original specification. For someone who charges their phone once a day, that's roughly 1 to 1.5 years before degradation becomes noticeable. For someone who charges twice a day, common among heavier users, that threshold arrives faster. By year 2, a well-used smartphone battery may be operating at 70 to 80% of its original capacity. By year 3, 60 to 70% is not unusual. At that level, a phone that originally lasted a full day on a single charge now struggles to reach dinner. The user experiences this as the phone getting worse. What's actually happening is more specific. The battery is delivering less, and everything built on top of it, the processor, the display, the radios, is working within tighter constraints. The device didn't age. The battery did. There's a piece of this that Apple made briefly, uncomfortably visible in 2017. When it was revealed that iOS had been deliberately throttling processor performance on iPhones with degraded batteries, without disclosing this to users, the reaction was significant. Lawsuits followed. A public apology followed. Apple introduced battery health transparency in iOS settings, allowing users to see their battery's current maximum capacity as a percentage of its original specification. That single change, a number in a settings menu, shifted the conversation for millions of users. People who had been quietly planning an upgrade looked at their phone and saw battery health 79%. And suddenly the question changed, not whether to replace the phone, but whether to replace the battery. What's significant about that moment isn't the corporate behavior it revealed. It's what it showed about information asymmetry. The degradation had been happening all along. The throttling had been happening. Users just hadn't been given the frame to understand what they were experiencing. Once they had the number, the decision looked different. Most people still don't know how to find that number, or what to do with it when they do. Consider a scenario that happens in American households every week. A woman in her mid-30s, let's call her Dana, has been using the same smartphone for 2.5 years. It's a solid mid-range device, bought outright, no contract. She's happy with the camera. The storage is fine. She uses it for navigation, messaging, social media, and occasional video calls with family. Over the past several months, she's noticed the battery draining faster. She keeps a charger at her desk now, something she didn't need before. The phone occasionally gets warm during calls. Once, it shut down unexpectedly at around 20%. She goes to her carrier's store. A sales associate looks at the phone, nods sympathetically, mentions that 2.5 years is a good run, and walks her toward a display of current models. She leaves 40 minutes later, having agreed to an upgrade. Her monthly payment goes up by $18. Over a 2-year contract, that's $432 above what she was paying. Her old phone, which she hands in as a trade, gets wiped and assessed. Battery health, 74%. The device itself is fully functional. It will be resold or refurbished. Someone else will use it without any problems. Dana's phone wasn't done. Her battery was degraded. Those are different things. She never had the information she needed to know the difference. Battery replacement for most major smartphone models costs between $50 and $100 at an authorized service center. Third-party repair shops typically charge less. The process takes an hour or less in most cases. Compare that to the cost of a new mid-range smartphone, $400 to $800, plus any associated plan changes, accessory replacements, and the time cost of transferring data, reconfiguring apps, and relearning a new interface. The financial gap between those two options is enormous. And yet battery replacement remains a relatively uncommon choice among American smartphone users for reasons that are worth examining. Part of it is visibility. Unlike a laptop, which displays a battery health percentage prominently in most operating systems, smartphones bury this information. On an iPhone, you navigate through settings, then battery health and charging. On Android, the path varies by manufacturer, and some devices don't surface this information at all without third-party tools. Part of it is friction. Replacing a smartphone battery requires either visiting a service center and waiting, or shipping the device away, or, for the technically confident, doing it yourself with a kit and a tutorial. None of these feel as easy as walking into a carrier store and walking out with something new. And part of it is narrative. The carrier store experience is optimized for replacement. The repair shop experience, where it exists, is less visible, less marketed, and carries a vague sense of risk. What if something goes wrong? The default story about a phone that's behaving poorly is that it's time to move on. Almost no one in the commercial ecosystem profits from telling a different story. Here's the behavioral pattern worth examining directly. When a device starts behaving unreliably, most people don't investigate. They accommodate. They start carrying a charger everywhere. They turn off features they used to use. They stop trusting the battery indicator and plug in at 50% just to be safe. They manage around the problem rather than addressing it. This accommodation phase can last months, sometimes years, and during that time, the user's experience of the device becomes increasingly defined by workarounds rather than by what the device actually is. By the time a replacement decision gets made, the original device has been living under such constrained conditions, reduced settings, constant charging anxiety, disabled features, that the user genuinely believes it has declined far more than it actually has. The accommodation itself becomes evidence of the problem, but the problem was never the phone. When people learn this, when someone explains what's actually happening inside the battery, why the symptoms appear, and what the actual cost of addressing it would be, the reaction is almost always the same. A pause, and then, why didn't anyone tell me this? There's a practical dimension to this that goes beyond individual device decisions. The average American household has multiple smartphones in active use. 2 adults, each on a 2 to 3 year replacement cycle. Sometimes teenagers with their own devices on similar timelines. That's potentially 3 to 4 smartphones being replaced across a household every 2 to 3 years. At an average cost of $500 per device, a household might spend $1,500 to $2,000 on smartphone replacements over a 3-year period, primarily driven by battery degradation that could have been addressed for $150 to $300 in battery replacements across those same devices. That gap doesn't register as a pattern because each replacement feels like an individual decision made for reasonable, specific reasons. Dana's phone was draining too fast. A teenager's phone kept shutting off. A partner's device was running warm. Each incident is isolated. The cumulative cost is invisible. There's something else that most people don't know about smartphone battery management. Something that would change behavior from the first day of ownership if it were presented clearly. Lithium-ion batteries degrade faster at the extremes. Consistently charging to 100% accelerates degradation. Consistently allowing discharge to 0 accelerates it further. The chemistry of the battery prefers a middle range, somewhere between 20 and 80%, and the closer you keep it to that range over time, the longer the battery maintains meaningful capacity. Most smartphones now have some version of an optimized charging feature that attempts to slow the final charge increment based on your sleep schedule. Recognizing that leaving a phone on a charger all night at 100% is hard on the battery, but this feature is often off by default, buried in settings, and rarely explained at the point of purchase. Heat is the other major accelerant. A phone that consistently gets warm during charging, during intensive tasks, or from being left in direct sun or in a hot car, is degrading its battery faster than the same usage pattern at a cooler temperature. This is true across all lithium chemistry, and it's true for a phone 2 weeks old as much as one 2 years old. Understanding these patterns doesn't require technical depth. It requires about 5 minutes of explanation that almost no one provides at the moment it would be most useful when you first buy the device. Some people find consolidated references helpful for this. Structured guides like Easy Battery Fix that bring battery maintenance and reconditioning methodology across different device types into a single framework. Whether that's useful to you or whether you prefer building the knowledge from other sources, the direction is the same, from passive replacement to informed decision-making. Jennifer, a project coordinator in her early 40s, went through 4 smartphones in 7 years before a friend who worked in electronics repair explained what she'd been doing. Not using her phone wrong exactly, just not understanding what she was doing to the battery. Charging overnight, every night, to 100%. Letting it die completely before charging when she could. Using a cheap fast charger that ran warm. Keeping the phone in her car during summer months. Each of these habits individually isn't catastrophic. Together, across 2 years of daily use, they compressed her battery's usable lifespan significantly. Her phones didn't fail because smartphones fail that fast. They failed because she had inadvertently been optimizing for maximum battery degradation from day one. When she changed her habits on her current device, a phone she'd been planning to replace, the decline slowed noticeably. 14 months later, she still has it. Battery health sits at 82%. She's adjusted her expectations about what that means for daily runtime, and they're realistic. She doesn't feel like she's managing around a problem. She feels like she understands what she owns. That shift, from managing around a problem to understanding what you own, is quieter than it sounds, but more durable than almost any other change in how people relate to their technology. It doesn't require becoming technical. It doesn't require opening the device or buying special equipment. It starts with knowing one number: your battery's current health percentage. Finding that number takes 2 minutes. Understanding what it means takes 5. Deciding what to do with that information, replace the battery, adjust your habits, or proceed with a replacement, knowing the actual condition of what you're handing in, takes however long you need. The phone in your pocket right now has that number. Most people have never looked for it. We talk about the smartphone as the most personal device most people own. It's the first thing many people look at in the morning and the last thing they interact with at night. It carries conversations, photographs, navigation, work, memory. And yet most people have less understanding of what's happening inside it than they do of what's happening inside their car. A machine they're required by law to maintain and inspect. The battery degrading inside your phone right now isn't a secret. It isn't hidden by design exactly. It's just not presented in a way that serves the owner. The information exists. The path to a different decision exists. The tools to address it, if you choose to, exist. What's missing for most people is someone who explains clearly what the symptoms mean, why they're happening, and what the actual choices are. That's a gap worth closing before the next upgrade cycle begins.